It's big dog season, and you can't stay still because you want it. Talk that talk, George. You still scraping your plate because you're hungry. Talk that talk.
Today is Thursday, July 25th. The year is 2024. I don't know why it's so dark in here. I got the lights on. Why is it dark so light in here? Anyway, I keep having these conversations with so many guys, and they're complaining about the black community. And these are conversations I'm having with men. I don't really have any conversations with too many women. I deal with a lot of my clients. So guys at the gym, a lot of black men, various ages, and they all say the same thing about family and the violence in the community. And they always keep looking back when they think times were better to make America great again. For some reason, and I don't know why, people seem to think that back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or whatever, at the time things were better. Okay. I don't agree with that. I don't care how far back we go. I think the internet has, in television, has educated us what's happening in our times. I think history books tend to whitewash stuff that happens in this country, and it looks like times were better back then, but it really wouldn't. We forget what was going on, the violence taking place in America, black men being lynched, burned alive. Tons of shit was going on back then. There were no happy times back then. I don't know what people are thinking. When you couldn't even go to a job or go vote without your life being threatened. So why are we in this position today where so many people feel like times, the bottom line is, I don't care if you vote Democrat, I don't care if you vote Republican. Nothing's going to change in our communities because of one reason. The vast majority of black Americans are educated in the public school system, and I don't care if it's in California, Georgia, New York, Michigan, Indiana, Miami, Florida. I don't care what state, what city. I don't care if it's a red state or a blue state. All these schools are fucking crap. If your children are going to a public school, they ain't learning shit. Some might be getting an education, but the vast majority are not. The educational school, the educational system is going to hell. And it's gotten worse. Since I've graduated high school, they're not learning nothing in these schools. So we're not going to be able to change the plight of black America as long as we continue to have Uncle Sam educating our children. That's why I don't have any children, because I knew back then. When I looked around the school system back then, I said, I don't want to send my children into this nightmare. When I lived in Gary, Indiana actually had some very good schools. The educational system was very good. They had very strict, the schools were good. It wasn't until about my freshman year of high school when my mother packed up and left Gary, got divorced, and she left Gary. And we went to Michigan first, and then we ended up in Cincinnati, Ohio, that I realized how good we had in Gary, because them schools were terrible. Once we got up, really Cincinnati, Ohio schools were terrible. That was the first time I was in an environment where I had white teachers who didn't give a fuck. Gary, I had black teachers who cared, who wanted you to have an education. Cincinnati, Ohio technically is part of the South, and they had slaves that came into Cincinnati, Ohio, and I found this out living in Cincinnati. From the outside, Cincinnati looks like a nice middle-class city, but it is not. It is a poverty-filled city. I don't know. I've been in Cincinnati since I left there in 1990. I haven't looked back. I'm not spending any time in Cincinnati, but I've been passing through there. But the schools were terrible back then. And I went to Aiken High School, terrible. And there were other schools that were worse than Aiken. Schools were terrible. The plight of black folks was terrible. We're not going to be able to change our destiny here in the United States without an education. And like I said, I don't care who you got in office, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, the schools remain crap because we have no business being there. We have no business being in the public schools allowing our children to be taught there. We need schools that we control, private schools with private education for blacks that we control the agenda for. And until that happens, it's a wrap. Integration of the school system didn't work out for us. White kids are still getting education in Atlanta on the north side of town. And in the public schools they have on the north side of Atlanta, they over there, it's a whole different world. Same school system though, so it's all Atlanta public schools. But they don't tolerate certain shit in them schools over there on that north side of town that they have to tolerate, that they tolerate on the south side of town. That's why parents who live on the north side of land, they're willing to pay a lot more for those houses. Because for the elementary school, there's a school, Mary Smith, I forget the name of that elementary school over there. That's a very good school system. That's a very good school. There's a couple of good elementary schools, at least for the elementary middle school. I think it's north side high, I don't know about it. I think it's kind of, once they get to high school level, most parents send their kids to private school. The public schools have sucked since integration. Prior to integration, the educational system was good for blacks and whites because they were separate. Although we had older books and all this other shit in the schools were run down and falling apart, them kids were getting education. But once they integrated these schools in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, I grew up in Gary. There was no integration going on in schools in Gary. There was no busing going on in Gary because all the kids, we was a black city. Who they gonna bus to? The white people fled when Mayor Hatcher took office. They haul ass. So by the time I got into school, which was probably about 1975 and 75, going to preschools and whatever. By the time I got to first grade, there were no white folks to be found. When we first moved into Gary, Indiana, we moved on to Tennessee Street, 701 Tennessee Street in Gary, Indiana, there were whites living there. But by the time I got into elementary school, there were no whites to be found in there. Gary had changed dramatically. The building in the city of Maryville transferred most of the wealth from Gary, Indiana to Maryville, Indiana, and so that killed Gary. But the schools were excellent schools. And I wish my mother had not been on this running all over America mess as we ended up down in Atlanta, which is a city. Y'all, let me just say this. I never cared for Atlanta when I first moved here. When I moved here to Atlanta in 1990 and looked around and saw all these poor, poverty-stricken niggas here, I should have packed up and said, okay, I'm out of here and went to New York, which is what my plan was. But what kept me here was a large gay population, and I was young. And I wanted to be like, see young black gays my age in large groups. I was surprised because I didn't even know they existed. And that's the mistake I made. Hanging around Atlanta to be a part of the gay community in the early 90s, and not realizing what I know now, it was not a good idea. I should have hauled my ass to New York and went to school. Never cared for Atlanta, but I've been here ever since. There were some positive things about Atlanta because it had the gay population here, black gays, and the city was easy, meaning crime was not as bad. You can maneuver through the city. I somewhat felt safe back then. And Atlanta was reasonable. I had my first apartment, was $350 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. $350, $360 was cheap. Renovated. Everything was pretty reasonable back then in the early 90s here in Atlanta. It was cheap. And that's what kept me here. Worst mistake ever. I should have got the hell up out of here. I realize that now. Water under the bridge. But until we change, if we want to change the destiny of the black community, we've got to look at the education that our children are getting. We all children, I ain't got no kids. Without an education, without a proper education, these kids are doomed. My nieces and nephews are worse off, and I would have never, ever have thought this was going to happen. But my nieces and nephews are worse off than the education I got in the 70s and the 80s in Gary, Indiana. They worse off because they get the education here in Atlanta. Worse off. They've been better off in Gary. Now, Gary doesn't really exist anymore the way it did. In fact, when I go to Gary, I don't even know what schools are open because there are lots of these abandoned schools all over the place. The city is the population has dwindled. Ain't nobody in Gary, Indiana, but that's a wrap. You can go there and buy a house for $1. I don't know what you're gonna do with it. People do live in Gary, and they have some nice homes in Gary. I have some family members, and I actually have some friends and associates that live in Gary. I couldn't live there though. Well, yeah, I guess I could. It's cheap. I imagine in Gary, go down to you can live in the Miller section of Gary. You can live a good life in Gary as long as you. And do they have Amazon delivery? I don't know where you can go grocery shopping and shit. You're going to have everything delivered. You have to drive to Chicago. That's all I can tell you. Take care of business. I don't particularly care for winter weather. And the last time I was in Gary was for my uncle's funeral. And the weather was horrible. And I had a cold. And I didn't want to, my aunt was there at the funeral. I didn't want to even hug her, but I was scared I would give her my cold I had. I was like, oh, God, I get this cold, y'all. I didn't know if it was COVID or what. I was like, I'm not feeling well. And I was afraid. I didn't know what I was going to have to get a COVID test when I got over to Chicago, and I realized that I didn't have COVID. I thought I had COVID or something when I got up there, but it was just the weather. You just never know when the middle of COVID was going on, so I was nervous. So I kind of stayed away from my cousins, during that period, during that funeral. The weather was freezing cold, snow all over the ground. It was horrible. But anyway, if we ever going to change, we're not going to be able to change. I don't care who you have in the office. The violence in our community, the lack of families, all the problems, there's a myriad of issues we have in the black community. Without an education, we're not going to be able to change that. And when education starts at a very early age, and the public school system has sabotaged and destroyed education for black people in this country. And that is the biggest issue we face in this country, is a lack of education. These kids are not getting educated. That's why we see the myriad of issues and problems that we see within our community. And until that changes, it's a wrap. But who am I? Just a crazy man on the internet. I'm ready to take these dogs out. I've been I got stuff I need to do today. I just want to do a quick video about that. But again, I don't care who the president is. I don't care who we elect. I don't care what state you live in. I don't care what city you in. I don't give a damn. It doesn't matter. We don't control the education for black people. Someone else's agenda is. Prime example, what made me do this video, they want to remove the AP classes here by African American Studies here in Georgia. They don't want to, the superintendent of the school decided we're going to take this out. Okay, listen. If you think your children stand a chance in public schools, you are a fool. We can look at all the generations of kids that came through this public school system, particularly here in Georgia and various other states, and you still don't send your kids there? You don't get it. In my opinion, the civil rights movement and Dr. Martin Luther King fucked generations of black people by integrating, pushing for the integration of the school system because it didn't work out for us. It ain't working out for us, y'all. Just my thoughts, my opinions. Everybody but look around you. Look at these schools. They're horrible. The area I live out here in Smoke Rise in DeKalb County, I don't know much about the schools over here, but from what I've talked to these neighbors, everybody says the schools are terrible. Matter of fact, one of my neighbors, there are a lot of white families moving into this area, younger families moving in with kids, but they don't send their kids to these schools, even though there's a new public school up the street. They say, oh, we don't go to that school. This white woman across the street from me who bought this house, and she's over there doing this massive renovation down a few doors down. They've been watching my house. She stole all my contractors over here, but she didn't steal. She's on working on business. Can he do my house? I said, you can talk to them. She's been working on that big ass house. These houses are raggedy. They need work. But she takes her kids 50 miles every day to a school in Fayette County in Trilith. Some school out there is 50 miles. She takes them out there. She stays out there all day with her children at the school, and then she brings them back home here to DeKalb County. I'm not sure why they live in this area, why they chose. I'm not sure what her husband does. But she literally drives her kids 50 miles every day to get them away from DeKalb County schools. That's what this white woman's doing with her children. And they're paying. This is not a free school either. This is a private school that she has her kids in 50 miles away, 50 miles there, 50 miles out. I'm like, oh, Lord, I couldn't do that, honey. But that's the extent that they're willing to go to get their kids an education, to make sure that they get the best, because they know these schools ain't crap. They said the schools, everybody said the schools are crap around here. I don't know. I don't have any children in the schools around here, but I've heard talk to enough people who work in the DeKalb County schools know, yeah, they horrible. I ain't stupid. Anyway, like I was just saying, until we change the way our kids are educated, nothing's going to change in our community. The violence, the ignorance, the illiteracy, the homelessness, but like, it's just a lot of stuff going on. And it all boils down to education, starting with preschool. It starts there. And these kids are not getting an education anymore. And until that changes, and like I said, I don't care who the president is, I don't care what state you're in, I don't care what city you're in, they're all terrible, because we don't control it. But anyway, that's just my thoughts and opinions. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. I had to get back to these dogs out before it started raining. It's supposed to rain again today. Anyway, today is Thursday, July 25th. The year is 2024. And I'm out of here. You all enjoy the rest of the day. I'll be back later with another video. But let me get my day started. I'm out of here.